So I'm sitting here with Sean Stevenson in the same cafe on Colfax. Um, Sean and I have known each other for maybe 8 years or so, maybe a little bit longer. We met during the Iraq War over at the Unitarian Church, not too far from here. So Sean, why don't you introduce yourself?
So my name is Sean. Grew up in Germantown, Philadelphia. At the same time, every summer I would live in a cabin in the middle of southwest Wisconsin on my grandfather's farm. And that's been a big influence on my life. Ended up growing up there from 12 to 17 on that farm. And then from there I moved to all over the place, Midwest, East Coast, and then eventually landed in Denver in '98. I've been here since then.
Yeah, glad you're here.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Sean, I know like things like kayaking and being out in nature, taking photographs, stuff like that's important to you, right? How
is.
come?
Well, I think that a lot of those things make me feel alive in some kind of way. And that time that I spent every summer in my dad's cabin on my grandpa's farm, every summer, there's 80 acres of woods with 2 valleys and 2 streams, and I got to just romp around and play, and I had a real connection with nature from that experience. And I think that that's had a big influence on my life.
Wow. So Sean, I'm gonna just dive right in here, man. One of the things that really inspire me and is impressive. I know that you've had some mental health issues in your life. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So one of the things that happened when I was about 2 years old, my parents divorced, and I felt like my mom abandoned me. And so that, on top of other traumatic experiences, led to real big challenges. And growing up, I was violent, I was angry, I was depressed, I was sad, I felt dumb because I had a learning disability, but I didn't know I had that until my senior year after high school. Even then, it was a challenge. So, yeah, a lot of factors led to me finally being diagnosed as having complex PTSD, and it took me several years to figure that out, and then also to figure out how to get over that. Which, I don't think you ever fully over it, but I feel like I'm about 90 to 95% over it with the help of really good therapists and meditation and self-help books, and I threw everything at the kitchen sink at it.
Yeah. It's just amazing. I know in the years I've known you, you go into a dark place for a while, but you always come out, man, fighting and trying to get your life back together and keep working at it. Man, you just never give up.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
Thank you.
I know you go to Sangha here and you meditate. What does that tell us about that? What does it do for you? Why do you meditate?
Why do I meditate? Well, at some point I had realized that there's really 2 worlds. There's an inner world and an outer world. And I think a lot of our society puts a lot of emphasis on the outer world, but not the inner world. And over time I recognized that the inner world is the much more important one. And once you recognize that, you realize that you kind of create your own suffering. And not only do you create it, but you can alleviate it. And it's I've learned over time that my meditation is the way to retrain my brain to stop creating suffering for myself. So I see it as one of the most valuable tools that I can use.
Well, and how often do you meditate?
I try to do it every day. Some days I lapse, but some days I do it twice a day. But I try to do it every morning before I wake up, about 15 minutes.
And what is it? What's the feeling after you've meditated? How do you feel?
So I think it's important to state that the first time I ever tried to meditate was terribly frightening. And I was sitting in my lazy boy chair, and I tried for about 10 seconds, and I just bolted out of my chair and ran for the bar. It was terrifying. And then over time, like anything, if you practice, you get more used to it. And now, I'm fairly calm when I go into it, and I don't feel much different. But there have been times where I have felt a lot better. I just know that it's a practice, and that even if I don't focus on how I feel before and after. I just realize that if I do this, it's going to benefit me, no matter how I feel, and so I just do it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're pretty open about your mental health issues, and there's a lot of stigma around mental health.
Yeah.
Like people don't talk about it and keep it secret. What kind of advice would you give somebody that is like walking around hurting?
I mean, first, I think, it all starts with education, educating yourself about guilt and shame. Guilt is I did something bad. Shame is I am bad. And I carried that stuff for years, but it was unconscious. And once I educated myself on what guilt and shame are and how they're really, we're all human and we all make mistakes, and it's unnecessary energy that you're carrying around. And so, now I can look back and talk about pretty much anything and not feel that negative energy, pull me down. So it's just, I think a lot of it's about education, about understanding that, hey, if you're depressed, there's a reason you're depressed, and it's not your fault. And, it's something you can get over.
Wow. Great. So one of the things that connects you and I is we march in the Martin Luther King Parade right down Colfax, right here. We just did it yesterday, and we've been doing it for years,
Yeah.
except for during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us about why you march.
Well, one reason is I get to spend time with you and get to know you, and I really enjoy it. It's amazing to see the people that come to you and are drawn to you, and so it's kind of like I get to experience that. So it's an experience that has several positive interactions. I get to see all the people that really care about what's important in life, about humanity, about the struggle, so I get to see the creativity that people portray throughout the march. So those are some of the things.
Yeah, it's been great, man. We enjoy that time.
Yeah, I do too.
Looking at you, most people don't realize, but you're biracial, right?
Quarter black.
And
And about 5 other things. I'm a mutt. I
Wow.
consider myself a mutt. What's
yeah.
up?
So, how do you, you get to see the world and racism through a different lens? Yeah. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. My mother's been a very impressive person in a lot of ways. She grew up extremely poor and struggled, and she recognizes there was some luck involved, but she worked extremely hard and kind of brought herself up to become a doctor, a very successful doctor.
And she's African American?
She's half African American, but identity-wise, half African American. But my relationship with her and seeing her have to struggle with all of that, and her stories of her early life, and how she didn't have the privilege that we had, and even after becoming a doctor, and she still gets treated differently, for being both African American and a woman, but I guess hearing her stories has been very enlightening. And then, I grew up, my father, being a sociology professor, had a different mindset. He had me grow up in a neighborhood where I was a minority. There were mostly black people in a row house in Philadelphia. So that was a great experience growing up. I got to see how being a minority was, but I was completely accepted. So that was some of my most fun times actually, was hanging out with kids my age that were from, different backgrounds.
You had a real unusual upbringing, man. You went to a Quaker school. You were raised in Germantown.
Yep.
And spent time in Wisconsin in a little cabin out in the woods.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
very unusual.
Yeah.
And I appreciate all of it.
Yeah.
I think of Emerson, and he talks about the road less traveled and how it's made all the difference. And I feel like my life I've kind of lived that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I know, like, survival skills. You've taught me a lot about survival skills, and,
Yeah.
and I know it's important to you. Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I think I like the creativity of it. I like the fact that it connects me with nature. I like the fact that it's, there's a lot of people that they look at the wild and are afraid of it. And the Native Americans, who I have a lot of respect for, they saw the woods or the wild as kind of like their hardware store, their grocery store, their playground. It's a different mindset. And I guess so for me, primitive skills is a way of feeling comfortable, like, hey, I can handle any situation in all of my adventures, and at the same time I'm connecting with nature.
So tell me a little bit about, I know you had a dog on the cabin, right? At the cabin you had a dog you told me about a couple times growing up.
Oh, I had a dog named Smokey. Yeah. He was we got him in Philadelphia, but he would come out with us every summer. You want to know about the dog?
Yeah.
So being an only child, my dog was kind of my best friend. And not feeling, the way that I was brought up, I didn't really feel connected to my parents very much. So my dog was literally like my best friend. And so we do all kind of stuff together. And then, he just had a blast because he had this 80 acres with 2 valleys and 2 streams. And he was he had a lot of hunting breeds in him. So he was, if you looked at his face, he had scratches all over the place, bites chunks out of his ear, he would just, so it was interesting to see him just kind of do his thing. And, he was kind of like this roaming the wild, like when I was, because I had a bow and arrow and a slingshot. And, I was playing in the creek, grabbing frogs and snakes or whatever it was. He was kind of right there with me.
Yeah, he got to go on vacation every summer with you.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, he was a city dog. And one time I actually noticed him. It was a street very similar to Colfax, where I was walking to school, and he had crossed halfway, was hanging out right on the yellow line, waiting for the traffic to stop, and then go the rest of the way. So he was
Pretty
quite an
smart
amazing
dog.
Yeah, he'd be gone for 2 days straight. We didn't know where he went, and then he'd come back. So he had his own adventures. Quite an interesting dog for sure.
Yeah. Wow. So you've had a pretty interesting career work-wise, right? You've done a lot of different things. Why don't you tell us some of the stuff you've done, what you've learned?
Sure. My first job out here in Denver, the first one that really comes to mind, and I worked with at-risk youth. And I did that for 6 years, but I kind of did it in 3 different jobs for 2 years. So the first 2 years was working from 2:30 to 10:30. I was kind of like these kids' parents. And then after 2 years, I decided to go into the school program because these kids were there 24/7 and needed schooling and everything. And so I was a counselor, but it was kind of supporting the teachers. And then after 2 years of that, they needed teachers. They couldn't even get anybody to walk in the door, basically. So I got what's called an emergency license. I basically had to sign a piece of paper and became a teacher for 2 years. So in that time, I learned a whole lot about, human interactions, what's appropriate, emotions. I had some incredible supervisors that one guy was a former professional basketball player that I didn't even know was a professional basketball player until like 2 years into my working, and he was just so humble, and he was able to listen so well, and so yeah, there were people there that modeled incredible social skills, and I learned a lot about just how to be with people and interact at that job. And then I worked for the Jefferson County Workforce Center, helping people with the job search process. So I would teach people one-on-one, I would conduct classes for interviewing, networking, resume writing, that kind of stuff. And that was really, I really enjoyed that too. It was quite of a challenge. But just both of those jobs are probably the most significant jobs that I've had, where I really felt like I was doing something important. I was making a difference. So,
Yeah. Wow. We're, like I said before, we're here at the Same Cafe. Tell people what the Same Cafe is.
Sure. So SAME stands for So All May Eat. It's an acronym, and it has a different model than most businesses in the sense that you pay what you can. So 50 cents will get you a meal, and it's really good food. Even if you don't have money, you can wipe tables, wash dishes, mop the floors. So no one's denied a meal, basically. And when I was going through one of my really difficult times, being really depressed, I live only 3 blocks away. So I started volunteering here as a way to just do something. And Brad and Libby, the founders, I think Brad was the only one working at the time, but I really enjoyed it, had a connection with it, and so that was about 15 years ago. And I don't volunteer anymore, but I still have a connection with the cafe. I eat here, a couple times a week at least. So it's a special place in my life.
And one of the neat things about this place too is, you can get a meal for 50 cents, or you can go ahead and pay for somebody else's meal, pay a little bit more than, so that you're buying a meal for someone else. Yeah. So it's pretty cool.
And the dignity, the whole intention was to create dignity for those, and it's a sense of community. There's a big sense of community here, and that's the reason I keep coming back. Because I want to be a part of that community.
Yeah, that's real important. Yeah. So Sean, this is a tough world, man. What gives you hope? What keeps you going?
It's interesting. There were times where I would see humanity as like a virus on the planet, and it's a mindset that you can choose to have. But over time, I think you realize there's a lot of good people out there. And Buddhism talks about the Buddha nature and the way of being that, there's all kind of really impressive people that you're not the ones you see on TV, right? They're the leaders that, they're the teachers, they're the firemen, whatever. And you just got to remember, I just got to remember that those people exist, and your attitude is your choice. Your mindset is your choice. That's the way I choose to be, I guess. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. Yeah.
I just realizing it's a choice. And I think just learning history and realizing that there's been times that have been a lot harder than this. I remember reading about the Civil War one time and how, we talk about how rough things are now, but man, compared to that, it is rough. It could be better, but it could be a lot worse. So I try to keep things in perspective.
Yeah, and you do a good job, man. And just wrapping up here, man, I just want to let you know that I really appreciate you. I love you, man, and it's a pleasure spending time with you. And thank you.
Back at you, Arnie. Love you too.
That was good.
Yeah, thank you.